Welcome to the Disruptance Podcast. The Disruptance Podcast is the show that disrupts the way entrepreneurs think to make them more profitable and impactful. Rethink tired and outdated business norms to welcome innovation and unlock your unlimited possibilities. Here are your hosts, Eric Forney and Greg Fowler.
Right. All right, I'm super excited about this one. As always, we got another episode of Disruptance. And Eric, today's episode, we're going down the line of reasons why entrepreneurs fail. There's so many people that are out there that are really looking for guidance on this process through any period or form in their life and their career. There's a Forbes article, which is the 11 reasons why entrepreneurs fail. Okay. I just wanted to get your opinion, Eric, and perspective, kind of dissecting this down to real actionable items or takeaways to really prove to everybody, hey, what should they be paying attention to? What should they be focusing on? How can they really beat some of these negative stats that are out here? One in particular, into this article, whether it's true or not, hey, Forbes, so this is 50% of entrepreneurs fail within the first 5 years. And they say only 2 out of 3 last longer than a decade. Okay. So whether that's true or not, Eric, we'll definitely discuss that. So where do you want to go?
Higher. I would have said that was a higher fail rate.
I would have thought so. Personally, I don't know where stats they're pulling, and obviously, we're gearing towards real estate professionals and entrepreneurs that way. But I think they're taking it across the large scope. I didn't dive too deep into the article that way, so just a few things that leapt out of me. But I want to go down the line here. I think it's important for everybody to kind of get your perspective or opinion. So here's a part of the list here. One of the biggest reasons, trying to be everything to everyone. So as an entrepreneur, you're trying to be everything to everyone and your ideal client. What are your thoughts on that, Eric?
This is probably one of the most common things that entrepreneurs do when they get into business or at some point during their life cycle. We've glorified and glamorized entrepreneurship, and especially in this fake influencer era that we live in. The reality of it is that only the Cheesecake Factory can have an overwhelming menu that is everything to everyone. Otherwise, other businesses need to be, McDonald's, or they need to be Chick-fil-A, where they specialize in one thing that they're an expert at delivering. In fact, this is how exciting I am, Greg. Lauren was out of town. She was being a Swiftie this past weekend, and I spent the weekend reading a Great Depression book. Talk about enlightening, uplifting excitement. Learning about the Great Depression is as good as it gets around here. And so one of the things that though I came across was the story of Lego. And, there's a lot of listeners who may know this story, but it was one I wasn't incredibly familiar with. But, at the time, Lego started in 1932. They were actually just like hand carving toys for kids. And at one point in time, there were more than 200 toys that the founders of Lego were selling, and they were all wooden toys. They went to this vendor fair, this exhibit, to try to sell the toys, and for the most part, the results were really underwhelming. And someone did them the favor of basically saying, hey, if I wanted to buy like wooden toy guns, I'd buy them from, this Hasbro. I'd buy this, wooden doll from Mattel, and, I'd buy it from these specialists. So if you want to be great and sell your toys, actually just narrow down on what you sell, make your focus really narrow, and then go all in on that one successful idea. And eventually that bred the Lego block that we know today. Now, it's been, 90 years since that evolution of Lego as a company. But when you think about the Lego brand, it really just is a studded piece of plastic that's been interlocking for now what amounts to be about the last 80 years. And they built a hell of a company on one single product.
It's when you mentioned that, and I'm very familiar with the Lego story, and it's interesting. This was not, again, everybody, this is not pre-planned when it comes down to it. Eric and I jump on here, and we're always bringing knowledge and information, but I've actually got this guy And so this is the first Lego toy as far as the wooden version, which Eric was
Okay.
talking about, was a duck. And so
Okay.
this is the just iteration of a Lego version
I
of
did
that first
not know
toy.
that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting how they've evolved, and I agree with you. They really took it to hone in on that build a brick sort of model, and a very consistent and specific audience right into that area. It's the same thing as an entrepreneur, and you look at
Yeah.
it from real estate professionals from a marketing perspective. It's the same principle that applies. I mean, to try to brand yourself accordingly, to be a one size fits all, to really connect in a meaningful way with anybody and everybody who could possibly buy your brand, product, or service is nonsense. I think really honing in and being specific on doing the due diligence is crucial. So I love what you're saying here.
Yeah. I mean, we see it as a huge challenge in real estate, especially with real estate agents. No one loves distraction more than a real estate agent. And so having that focus around the things that actually matter is exponentially the cause of desired results.
It's huge, and again, that whole reminder why I have that duck on my desk is to remind me of humble beginnings. I think that everyone starts at a very specific place and can grow to anywhere the imagination can run with the proper direction. And again, obviously understanding who you're talking to. So I think that that's an important to do. This is kind of correlate to the next portion of it, not knowing your market. So another reason why real estate professionals fail is not knowing their market. So what are your thoughts on that, Eric? Does that kind of segue
Yeah.
into where we were talking earlier?
Yeah, I mean that's a difficult one when I think about the real estate side of things, and I say that it's difficult because you know I think the reality is that there are these like stair steps of success or stair steps of evolution of your business as a real estate agent, where you initially go wide to try to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And then you start to narrow down as you accumulate a database and as you accumulate your skills. But probably more importantly, when we think broadly about entrepreneurship, the one of the main failures of not knowing your market is not knowing what it takes and whether you're actually just at an uphill climb to try to sell a product that there's no demand for. Are you too early to sell a product, or does it solve a problem that's expensive enough that people are willing to pay for? One of the challenges for a lot of people is trying to determine if this is a solution to a problem. Is the marketplace ready to accept the solution, and will they pay the amount of money that I need in order to achieve my financial goals? You can be too early. Google Glass has shown that. There were I believe it was a company called like Black, I'll get the name wrong, but it's something like Black Magic or Magic Box or whatever, that was kind of the initial iPhone a decade or so ahead of time. You
Wow.
can be way too early for the public to accept the product you have, even when you have the right business model. So that's where understanding the market comes into play.
Yeah, I really like that perspective when you're dialoguing with that, Eric. And I think most entrepreneurs they put a very personal reflection on a product or service that they would want or that they would need, and not really looking outside of your own scope. Right. So saying to yourself, hey, you know what? If I really want to open up a pretzel shop, because I love pretzels, they're amazing, salty and soft and chew everything. But is it right for me to put this in this location? Is the demand going to be there versus if I put the supply? Unfortunately, I think the lack of market research and due diligence for most entrepreneurs it's sad. It's just not there. From a real estate standpoint, I mean, you know this better than most, Eric. There's a product and a service people need to buy and sell homes. This has been and always will be that way in formula. So understanding if you're going to put your efforts into something that's going to yield a result, real estate is a phenomenal place to go, place to be. It's been there, done that.
Well, yeah, and that's where having a first business as a service can be such a big advantage. If you take that same equation, you look at you could start a landscaping company. There will always be grass, right? There are a number of you could do house cleaning. You could do a number of different things where there is enough market demand that you
Sure.
can overcome the competitors in the landscape or in that industry that you're in. and then you choose to pivot after you've cut your teeth on that initial professional services business. You can decide what to pivot into later. But rather than go all in on something without knowing the total addressable market or the demand, and then trying to build a product, man, to me, a service is the ultimate entry point into entrepreneurship.
Oof. Beautiful stuff. And I think this segues real nice into this too, Eric. The article and the next kind of main reason why entrepreneurs fail, biting off more than you can chew. Now, I would state most entrepreneurs, people that are going to put themselves into this equation, they tend to be positive people, optimistic people, right? So they're always going to go for it and hit the major goals, and sky's the limit and then some. But there is a point. Biting off more than you can chew is a reality. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the tough part is that that's art versus science. In that there really is no way to easily determine until you dive in to understand whether you've bitten off more than you can chew, other than potentially mentorship and getting people who've been there and done that before you, both those that have been successful and those that have failed. You can shorten the half-life of failure by reaching out and building relationships and getting insights from people who have done either successfully or unsuccessfully what you're attempting to do, to get a perspective of whether you're biting off too much at one time. Because otherwise there really is no easy way to determine from the outside looking in, unless this is your first business. If you're Evan Spiegel and you're going to found and you're just like boy wonder of CEOs and starting multi-billion-dollar companies in your young 20s, then knock yourselves out. But most of us are not.
Right.
And so unless you're have the capacity to be the Snapchat founder at 24 years old, most of us need to inch our way up and fail forward. And the best way to do that is by getting the right people around you and then to incrementally grow without these massive aspirations.
I think that's kind of back to the research, really understanding what a day in the life looks like for that entrepreneur or professional down the line that you're going. And, I couldn't have said it better, Eric. I mean, surrounding yourself with great people who have been there, done that. There are people that are preaching that everyone's thinking too small, and whatever goal you have, triple it. There's a 10x movement. No disrespect, Grant. If you're listening to season 2 of Disruptance here,
of course.
I think there is the attainable aspects to stay informed, but it doesn't hurt to dream and have those effects. But ultimately, you got to do the work. I mean, it's like wake up to make the dreams come true. You just can't keep dreaming.
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at even like one of the successful business that you've probably heard of called Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg just had his big vision was just to pick up chicks at Harvard, right? And it wasn't to fly blimps over India and provide internet all over the world, including to developing countries. Only a lunatic would think that was a realistic vision or something that's worth setting sail for as an entrepreneur initially. The goal was just to pick up chicks at Harvard, building an online yearbook. Right. And then from there, it slowly became Facebook. The problem with, trash advice, like, have this big vision, is that it's reckless. And it oftentimes causes entrepreneurs more harm than anything. Now, I personally, probably one of the best books that I've read in my entrepreneur journey was 10X. It was right book, right time in order to think about applying the tactics. But it doesn't mean be ridiculous and foolish and bet everything on some pipe dream.
Well said. I think that using that as motivation and principle tools to then apply, not everything has to be taken to the exact degree that it's represented. You can take bits and pieces of life, and everyone's goals and desires are different. And I think that To get there, there's that adage is no one does it alone. The lone wolf mentality isn't a reality. And this kind of comes to the next main reason why Forbes is saying most entrepreneurs fail here is not delegating.
Yeah.
So Eric, I mean, you've been in the business, absolutely dominating the space, really building incredible organizations. So you better than most would really understand the importance of delegation. But let's hear it from your perspective. What does that look like, for growing and scaling for an entrepreneur to delegate?
This is for me is still one of the biggest challenges that I have on a daily basis. And one of the hardest problems probably when I observe other people who are successful but trying to go next level is the delegation component. In fact, I just had a coaching call about it, 2 days ago. It is one where I have found that there are a few people who are world-class at delegating just instinctively. And then for the rest of us, we have to build the muscle and the habit of delegation. So what I teach people then is that you start small and you delegate the things that don't matter in order to build the muscle of delegation so that you can get comfortable growing your ability to delegate effectively over time. So if I'm thinking about then how do I apply it tactically, I would say start by delegating your someone mowing your lawn. Because you're just a degenerate if you care what direction the lines go. Like find something else to worry about, and then so delegate.
Man, that was a direct blow at me right here.
Right. And then find someone to clean your home, right. Find someone to watch your children. So think about the smallest incremental items you can shave off of impact and get in the habit of trusting other people to do the job as well or better than you. And then you work yourself up into understanding that you can hand off other things, but I'm not sure that it ever comes naturally unless you're one of those people.
Yeah, no, I love that that kind of step-by-step process into your mind, getting comfortable letting go, as Disney Frozen is so well known for, just to let it go.
Not that your daughter loves to watch Frozen, of course.
That's right, on repeat, mind you, Frozen 1 and 2. But I think the idea though behind that, Eric, is so important for anybody who's in this process or really going down that line to say, hey, you know what? No one's going to do it better than me. I just take everything on my shoulders and apply everything. Unfortunately, if you don't delegate, it's going to be very difficult for you to grow and scale and or leverage what you're currently doing. And from every single conversation that I've had with a top tier entrepreneur that's out there, that is one of their biggest superpowers, is be able to identify the highest and best uses of their time and then understand that there are other people who are going to do certain tasks that they were doing much better. And that's their sole purpose, their enjoyment behind it. So everybody wins in this scenario as a team. But I love the adage of just taking those steps, even if it's something as mowing your lawn, cleaning your house, somebody watching your kids, taking baby steps with your business. Yeah.
I mean, somebody brought it up the other day. I forgot about this, but like there was a point in time where we would deliver. Now this was before you could get like online earnest money, but gosh, I would even send earnest money checks with Uber drivers. Like I sent a car seat to Lauren in an Uber with an Uber driver because, thinking about ways to delegate task work is kind of step one. Then you delegate thinking work and creativity after you've delegated task work. It's when you delegate the thinking work that gets difficult. So this is where the art and science component comes into play. Is you have to work on the mindset around delegating unless it comes natural to you. And so first you have to get to this place of understanding that you can and do delegate. You're just likely blind and unaware to the ways that you delegate in life. You delegate your children's education to a teacher and several of them into, the entire education system. You delegate the safety and livelihood to your doctor because you trust them to be the expert on that. And, if we wanted to delegate this podcast to Mr. Beast, it would likely have exponentially more downloads, right? And so it can be done when you think about it through the framework of who's the most amazing person at doing this one thing, that if I hired them, I could trust them to hand it off and never think about it ever again. That's the framework that you want to operate from when you think about delegation.
Beautiful. Well said. And I'll definitely have Disruptance people contact Mr. Beats people, and we can figure something away. I think that'd be really good.
We need our own candy bar.
I'm hungry, Eric. You're talking about Cheesecake Factory and candy bars. This is the best, man. So let's go into what is known as one of the other main reasons for entrepreneurial failure is poor planning. So I think it's that kind of that old adage: if you fail to plan to fail sort of mentality. So where's your thought process on that, Eric? I mean, if you were sitting down with an entrepreneur and you were to advise them on, really setting this up and planning for success, what are some things that stand out to you? What would you say? I mean,
it's tough. I'm conflicted on this, and I say that because there's a lot of things that I've done in life that I had no plan for that have worked out pretty well.
Okay.
And yet I also realize that if I don't plan on a daily basis, that my days are reactive or inactive. And so there's kind of this art and science behind planning. What you don't need is what they would teach you if you paid a bunch of money to get one of those overpriced degrees on your wall. An MBA would tell you that you would put together this, multi-page business plan. And yet most entrepreneurs need a business plan that they can look at on one page. And, the interesting thing is Gary Keller always says that it's hard to be on the same page as a business when there are multiple pages. The best way to be on the same page is to have one page. And so if you can't put your business plan onto one page, it's likely too complicated to execute on. And most of it is wrapped up in nuances and unknowns that a bunch will change between the time of planning and the time of execution that you don't necessarily need to have wasted your time on. And so there's again this art and science component to where you have to have a plan, but at the end of the day you have to get into action, and then you have to reflect, and then you have to iterate.
And I love the art and science to that too, Eric. I mean, you're not going at this as an entrepreneur blindly. The due diligence is there, setting up in structure, having realistic expectations, but then as you're stating, taking execution. We've had this conversation before, the success and failure, luck being a part of that, or some serendipitous nature. So I think that the more you work and the more you are really going down that line, the luckier you become, the more things do open up as opportunity. And some of those things aren't planned, as you mentioned. I mean, you're just going down the road doing your thing as an entrepreneur, and opportunities come a knocking. So I think that that's really an important thing to do.
Well, I've shared this with crowds of a few hundred people and probably on podcasts as well. But like one of my favorite stories of this is, in 2020, we had a plan. And that year we had a pandemic, and the pandemic that we had in 2020 as a real estate company was that we had a pandemic of babies. There were six people that got pregnant that year, and none of that was on my business plan. You do not build a business and craft a plan that says, this year I think that most of my sales organization is going to get pregnant, or that the bulk of my staff will be out on maternity leave. It just isn't in a plan. And so the planning is good for the direction that you're going, but it doesn't necessarily determine the exact steps that you take while going that direction.
A great analogy all the way through and through. And again, no one has a crystal ball. I think that that one constant is the inconsistency of life. I mean, no one knows what that looks like, but I think that is a big contentious topic for why entrepreneurs fail. I mean, this next one, close to my heart and thought process, but I would kind of add in addition to most entrepreneurs fail because they don't have enough marketing. I would put this question to you in this way too, Eric, is not enough marketing, but I feel that sales and marketing are underutilized in a thought process for entrepreneurs. So what are your takeaways on that? Not enough marketing and or sales perspective.
Greg, I might hurt your feelings on this one. I don't know. I'm
Turn away.
struggling with it. I'm struggling with this one, and I say I'm struggling with it because most. I don't know that that's the primary reason why a business would fail.
Mhm.
What I think that you could probably like strip it down to further is that you don't have a sales strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes if you think about it, in fact, like Bumble, for instance, Bumble really started by having a, zero or low dollar spend for marketing.
Hmm.
And, Bumble does this kind of grassroots guerrilla marketing strategy similar to like American Apparel.
Hmm.
But most people think about marketing, they think about spending money.
Right.
Whereas marketing really is about getting attention and then getting attention around a product. Now,
Sure.
you probably have a better definition of marketing than me, but that's kind of what my head goes to around. If I'm starting a business, what I need to be in is the attention business
Yeah.
in order to create awareness to my product for those that are looking to solve a problem that my business solves.
I agree with you 100% on that. There's no offense taken onto that thought process, Eric. I think people need to understand the differences between marketing and sales. Marketing is exactly as you stated. It's gravitating and grabbing attention to your target audience that could potentially need and or use your brand, product, or service. The sales component is still there needing. Once the product is there, they need to be sold. And ultimately, when you're starting as an entrepreneur, when you're starting out, people think, I'm just going to set up a business and everyone's going to know who I am and what I do, and everyone's going to be sold on it automatically without me saying a word. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
People need to know who you are. They need to like you and trust you before the business happens. Now, whether it's guerrilla or organic marketing or it's paid one way or the other, it's got to get done. People need to know who you are. And
Yeah.
we're not talking about sphere of influence directive. We're talking about sphere of influence, friends, family, and or past that. I think ultimately they do need to be convinced and articulated in a message as to why they would use you. Why would they trust you? Why do they want to go down that line? And I think that's where the salesmanship would come into play, not in the used car sense that people would look to when they think about sales. It's just really communication and connectivity to the end user, person to person, human to human at the end of the day. But like I said, if I don't know Eric Forney exists, I have no option or opportunity to use him at all ever. And that's the whole point when it comes down to. So I think that they're a little off with not enough marketing. I think it's marketing and or brand recognition, saturation, and it's sales. I think those go hand in hand in nature. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's hard for, if you're at the beginning of your Tylenol building business, if people with headaches are not aware that you have the solution to solve their problem of having a headache, they won't buy your product. And so there has to be an awareness
Mhm.
to solution map your product to the correct target audience. We
Mhm.
have to find your supply and meet the demand one way or the other. And then obviously there's got to be some way to deliver it from a sales standpoint, but
Yeah.
it's an attention business eventually. This is actually where I like the 10x business from a concept standpoint. Is the best takeaway for me from the Grant Cardone book we
Mhm.
were joking about earlier is that really 10x should be about generating attention,
Mhm.
not about thinking stupid, and thinking about how do I maximize attention and reach and ignore the haters.
Mhm.
That's probably the best way to think through the actual principles themselves from 10x.
Yeah, I agree. I think looking at it from that standpoint is going back to the planning and due diligence. I mean, setting it up in a way where you're understanding who your audience is, understanding what brand, product, and service you provide, and how that fits into their life as a positive, how that gets them from their current situation to desired situation. What gap do you bridge or fill? And then ultimately put that out there to see what the results are. Once you have those identifiers that are really converting, people are absolutely excited about you and what you offer and what you bring. 10x it, right? You can literally then add fuel to the flame. But so many people jump to the paid metric, and I think it's nonsense. I mean, you're adding fuel to a flame that's existingly there. But if there's no flame to start, you're just pouring gasoline on the ground. So I think entrepreneurs need to start it in an order of building a business from the ground up the right way, understanding who they are and who they serve, and then letting the marketing and the sales aspect come into play as that grows and evolves. So but I do see where they're coming from, because I think they're looking at it from a broad scope, which is great. I think in turn, as businesses open up, no one has heard of you. No one knows what you do. No one knows who you are. So you got to market yourself. I think that's what their takeaway is. But I will tell you, the conversations that I've had with entrepreneurs, they don't realize how much time and effort. Oh gosh, I'm going to set up a business. Everyone's going to come to me. It doesn't work. It's not Field of Dreams, right? You look at it from that standpoint. If you build it, they will come.
Awesome if it was.
That is just not the case. You got to make them fill up the stands. I think that's important. Just let them know. So the next one, not having enough money, Eric. I mean, the idea behind this is interesting to me, and I don't know if they're meaning not having enough money as far as capital into the business, or to set yourself up ahead of time as an entrepreneur so you have a nest egg. What are your thoughts on entrepreneurs failing because they don't have enough money? What comes to mind?
What comes to mind is if you're attempting to do something that it requires a massive capital outlay, you're running the wrong business. Or you're being reckless, especially if you have a lot of responsibility. Now, there's going to be some prepubescent person on the internet who will say, but no, Eric, it worked for so-and-so. And yeah, of course, there are outliers to that. However, if you have responsibilities and you have people that depend on you from a livelihood standpoint, and your dream is to be a business owner, then do it responsibly. And there's ways to do it responsibly. And the first way to do it responsibly from a capital standpoint is minimize, lower, and limit your expenses to only the money that's necessary to survive. That means if you have to either pick up side jobs or you have to eat ramen, if you're committed to being successful, then be committed. But the best way to minimize the capital expense is to minimize the dollar that you spend on supporting your lifestyle, and cut those out so that you can reinvest them into the vision of the business that you want and that you have. And so learning to live like you're poor by minimizing your expenses is probably the best way to solve money problems initially, so that you can invest them into the business and then multiply and compound those returns. Also then thinking through of ways to get either community support. We talked about ways to, generate like government grants and taxes. And there are a lot of ways to create capital to put into your business. But one of the things that will cause people to either quit early or to run out of money is the way that their lifestyle creeps above and beyond their income early in the business. One of the most threatening ways to go out of business early is to spend your money in your personal life before revenue comes in to catch up, because there is that launch period. Right. There's a launch period of getting sales right away that, usually at best case, you probably won't see income for 30 days. Most people, it's going to take longer than that. And so you need every dollar worth of oxygen you can have in order to stay afloat.
I love the advice that you're giving onto that, Eric. And I feel that this is a big concern for a lot of entrepreneurs jumping into any business venture, and especially into the real estate space. And so many people say, hey, have X amount of dollars in reserves, make sure that you live lean and within your means. Time will come as you put the effort in and you'll continue to grow. But that lifestyle creep is a thing. And that's not just for entrepreneurs. That's for every American. I mean, it comes down to it. You started out making $80,000 a year and you spent $80,000. You got a promotion, you're making $180,000, you're spending $180,000 a year. You're essentially in the same spot you were making $80,000. You're just in a nicer house with nicer things, but you're still in the same amount of pressure and or stress. It is something that people don't talk about enough, and I'm glad you mentioned it.
There's no amount of money that you can make that will give you the same peace of mind that not having expenses will give you. there is some incredible peace of mind around being able to actually invest money towards your future rather than waste money on things that you think will bring you a level of happiness or a level of fulfillment that they just never will. Having peace of mind is far more fulfilling than buying things to impress people that won't like you and you don't like them.
That don't even care what you have.
No.
I mean, true. I mean, it's the idea of put it in your perspective. How much do you spend time thinking about other people's stuff? Yourself. I mean,
Never.
I'm talking to the audience here, to you.
Yeah.
So think about it. If you never think about other people's stuff, why do you think that people care what you have or what you don't have or any of those things?
Yeah.
So I agree. Live the life by design that you plan with your spouse, significant other. If you're, on your own into this world in the venture time being, do it for the right reasons. But I think that is just a big proponent into it. I mean, I looking back, for me, I don't have this glamorous story, origin story like you do, Eric, where you just had a skyrocket sort of scenario. I mean, what you did early on in your career is phenomenal. I mean, that's just a beautiful, beautiful representation for me. I mean, when I shut that corporate America salary faucet off and left that comfortable, safe situation and started my own business, it was scary. I mean, to me, into that thought process, you look at it, and money is a serious thing. Setting it up, having reserves, there's never a right time. You can always have more money in the account. You can always have more knowledge. You can always have more contacts. Ultimately, it's never going to be comfortable. So I think that for me, it took me 3 months. I mean, so I shut it off 3 months. Now that's quick in relativity to some individuals, I think. But I was prepared for a year. I mean, I was prepared for a year to say, look, this is what I'm setting up and structure. One of the books that really helped me, it's behind me. It's actually right there. It's When to Jump by Mike Lewis. If you're watching it, you can see my finger pointing at it, but it's called When to Jump with Mike Lewis. And it talks about kind of every evolutionary thought process that pretty much every entrepreneur has had at any given time from all different walks of life, starting different careers, making shifts, putting everything out on the line. Everybody's got a different thought process and way and when to do it, but it's a very helpful book. If you're not big into reading, just download it, listen to it. It's definitely worth it if you're an entrepreneur. I think it'll put a lot of perspective on when the right time for you is, if that's the case, for sure.
So the funny thing, Greg, too, though, like you mentioned the origin story of success on my end, and I was fortunate to have success quickly as a real estate agent, and the part that most people typically gloss over is the part where I had $10 and 72,000 in credit card debt. Right, I was returning building materials to Menards in order to eat. At least to try to get as many weeks worth of food as possible. With $96, I'm doing the math on how many meals I can get out of $96 at Menards, right? It's like dry soup, cereal, and milk was what I walked out with because I thought, hey, worst case scenario, this will at least get me through until I can figure out a way to generate money on whatever the next way to bring income is. That part oftentimes gets left over. But the reality is that I've asked a lot of entrepreneurs this question around like, what does money give you? And, the question being, what does money give you? And then a lot of people often respond with like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, it gives you some feeling. What is it? What is the feeling that money gives you? And the answers oftentimes vary depending on where the person is in their journey of business and life. And the most common one for people when they're starting is typically validation. Is that it is a way of me using a scorecard to measure myself against my perceived inner worth. And then eventually, I think that people I've found transition out of the validation phase with money and then get into the security phase. Mm-hmm. And because at a certain point, you wake up and go, you know what? I've proved to myself enough that I can do this. I don't need money anymore to decide whether I'm good enough. I have receipts. And so the receipt said I'm good enough. Now I want money so that my family doesn't have to worry about whether they're good enough or whether they have to make sacrifices. It just plays a different role as you continue to evolve, I think, throughout the business journey.
I love that perspective, Eric. And again, being an entrepreneur as well as accumulating wealth and assets that way, I think is different for everybody along that journey. You evolve as a person, as a business professional. And I think that there's different depth and meaning to that. Whatever that is to you in your journey, take it. Just know that it's going to evolve and change. That's a very good point that you bring up. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I used to spend my money on, custom suits, and here I am. I'm wearing this graphic T-shirt I made from AI, from Midjourney or something. Like
Good man, good man.
That's where I've gone to life, because this is $15, and I've got to wear some shirt, so I might as well wear the lowest price one.
Well, you don't have to wear a shirt, Eric. I mean, this is not a kids show. So, I mean, for all the ladies out there, that's maybe you put something in the comments. Maybe Eric will oblige you. But I think looking at it from this standpoint, this is really good. And I want to take it to the next spot, Eric, which is fascinating to me. I wasn't exactly sure what they meant by this in this article, but the next reason as to why most entrepreneurs fail based off this article was lack of soft skills. So soft skills is kind of, as they're attributing to, is attitude, communication, motivation, networking. What are your thoughts into the intangibles as an entrepreneur, right? I mean,
yeah. I'm surprised that this would be one of them. Certainly, we've all encountered that instance, but I guess the only context that I have, or what comes to my mind initially, is I remember being in a training one time, and it was the top 1% of real estate agents. In fact, it was top 100 real estate agents within Keller Williams. We were meeting with Gary Keller, and one of the things he said was, as long as it took you to be good at sales, it will take you 3 times longer to learn to be a great leader.
Wow.
As long as it took you to learn to be great at sales, it will take you 3 times longer to be a great leader. And so that's what goes back into my head on a regular basis, especially as I, coach and consult with real estate leaders all over the country. It almost always, I probably share that quote with them over and over on almost probably every month when we have conversations, because for whatever reason, that's the most difficult skill set to acquire is leadership.
Wow.
And so soft skills and leadership really go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of the intangible natures into entrepreneurialism. And I think, I don't know, a lot that leaps out to me is that the motivation, the attitude. I mean, you can learn a process, a trade, a system, daily activities that get you to an end result as an entrepreneur, as a business professional, especially into the real estate space and world. But you really can't teach a good attitude. You can't put your self-motivation in, right? You've got to show up and want it. You've got to have a positive and healthy attitude to move forward. And I know that a lot of leaders, and I'd question this to you too, Eric, when you're bringing somebody on, is that something that you're articulating as to the attitude and the motivation as the individual person more so than the skill sets? Or what are you looking for that way? Because I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm actually not, and maybe that's a blind spot. And I say that because I just can't even fathom that idea of waking up and bringing a shit attitude. I'm not going to say that I don't or haven't. Listen, my wife is like the most amazing person. She wakes up with a great attitude every day. I usually have to get myself into that habit. However, what I really hear is the idea of waking up motivated and committed. Mm-hmm. Because if you're motivated and committed, your attitude is irrelevant. And I mean that by saying that, how can you be motivated and committed to go make an impact and help people and simultaneously have a bad attitude? To me, those two things are in conflict with each other. If you're convicted that what you're doing is meaningful work and that you're helping people solve some of their most important problems, how is it possible to wake up with a bad attitude? And if you're an entrepreneur who wakes up with a bad attitude, go find something new to do.
Oof, well
I,
said.
I can't imagine working a 40 years prison sentence of work that you have no fulfillment and no enjoyment from. There are plenty of opportunities and jobs in today's society that you can find one that brings you some joy and some level of fulfillment to do meaningful work. But especially the business that we work in with real estate agents, if you haven't wrapped your head around the idea that what you do makes an impact on the livelihood of Americans, then you're just in the wrong business. Because I've never found a single day that's been difficult to go to work doing this, because given the alternative, this is the best thing that an idiot like me from Markville, Indiana is capable and qualified to do. And so I'll skip to work for that reason.
At a high level, mind you, Eric. So you're not just doing it, you're doing it at a high level. So there is a big difference, and I'm going to argue that to you. But what's interesting is you mentioned the motivation and really that kind of stick-to-itiveness in nature. You can't help but having that positive in nature attitude. And I agree with that thought process. We're talking about business into that. But this is a Shark Tank quote from Lori. Anybody's familiar with Lori at Shark Tank. She said that entrepreneurs are the only people who will work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours a week. So I think that it's interesting, kind of alluding to your earlier pushback on, your story, and kind of it glossing over seeming, wow, look at how fast Eric skyrocketed. People don't pay attention to how much work and effort entrepreneurs put into it to really get to where they're at. And I think that brings to the final number here on the list of the 11 reasons why most entrepreneurs fail. They listed burnout. So, I mean, everybody throws this around, Eric. Oh, I'm burning out. I'm burning the candles at both ends. What's your thought process on burnout? Because I know you and so many other people do, but you work. I mean, you put in the time. So I have a feeling what direction you're going to go here, but I want to hear it. I know the audience does too. So what are your thoughts on burnout?
I want to be mindful of burnout being, a real thing for people. The reason I'm open-minded to it is because of the events of the pandemic. That to me becomes this like ultimate amalgamation of circumstances that likely impacted a lot of people's ability to sustain work and feel burnt out. So I like to be open-minded to it. However, I kind of just go back to this thought around the fact that if you are burnt out and you burn out consistently or repetitively, find something new. It shouldn't be difficult to wake up and be motivated and excited and to be committed to doing what you agreed to do, unless you're doing something that you're not actually motivated, committed, and excited to do. If you ask me to go start a paving company or a line striping division or to go start a paver patio installation company, I'll be burnt out in minutes.
There you go.
But when you get the right product market fit to you, you get energy even on the days that are hard. You wake up and you realize that today their only option is to go back to work and do it again today. And what is the alternative? That's what I always just think about is like, people will say to me, he's like, well, you work a lot. And, even when you get punched in the face, you still wake back up and you show up. Well, what's the option? To not? When you realize there is no other option, the decision is easy. The decision is easy when things in life are black and white. You no longer have to wrestle with what direction and what decision you are going to make when the decision's already been made for you. And so I wake up committed to my wife. I don't wrestle in the morning with whether I'm going to be committed today or not. I don't wrestle with whether I'm going to be committed to doing the things that I set out to do from a business standpoint. And because they've already been pre-decided, there's no need to waste time on them.
I think that's very insightful as you mentioned so many of those things, Eric. And what I'm taking away into addition, because as entrepreneurs and as real estate professionals into that realm, it's a conscious decision to go down that road. You're not forced. So to me, I think that there's a difference between burnout if you're working for corporate America, the job that you absolutely hate, that you just kind of kept going down the road because it was the course of least resistance. That's what you were supposed to do. That's what everyone told you to do. Go to school, get a job, work your way up the corporate ladder, retire with a pension. If you fall into those categories, I feel like burnout is more prevalent into those natures because people feel like they're stuck, they're cornered. But as not, you made the decision to say, I'm going to start this business. I'm going to go down this road. So you can't say you're burned out off of a decision that you made. And to your point, if that ends up being it was the wrong decision and you shouldn't be in the business in the first place. It's not to say that people can't have bad days or bad weeks or heck, even bad months. I think that it is a motivation and attitude sort of standpoint. And it's a amalgamation of everything that you had mentioned here and more. Obviously identifying the negatives into why entrepreneurs fail. But I think looking at it from the standpoint is we have addressed all the reasons why you can succeed. And if you want it and you put the work, it will come to fruition as long as you stick with that. In nature, it's not to be rah. I just think that you bring up some really good points about burnout, Eric, and I think that people need to hear it.
Well, I'm listening to this book I'm only a couple days into it, but it's a book called Resilient. John Eldridge is the author on it, and he wrote a book that I like called Wild at Heart. It's a book for men, and it's super manly, and it's all about like doing things outdoors that I don't know anything about, but this book, Resilient, one of the things he talks about is the idea that a lot of society, a lot of people right now have this challenge where the events of 2020 through really maybe even today is there's been a lot of compounded trauma for people. And when you kind of get those paper cuts of compounding trauma and tribulation, that eventually when something major comes along in life that typically personal in nature, that it really just breaches the dam of emotional reserves, and people start to break down and become burnout or become, do things that would be very unlike their normal self or pre-pandemic self. And I can get my head around that. It's why habits and environment and things and daily consistency around how we feed our both our physical body and our mental health makes such an impact on the trajectory of life. Because if you don't stay ready, you get depleted on an ongoing basis. And so the training and the repetitious conditioning, both mentally and physically as an entrepreneur, are incredibly important for that reason.
It's beautiful. And again, the habits, the actions, and continuous nature, it's grooming. I think that you really just got to put forth the effort, and the consistency in nature. Those little things every day add up to the big things. And that's huge, Eric. We hit the list. I think that, if you were curious and wondering what they were, here they are, and here are the answers to it. So for me, it's just get out there and make it happen. But Eric, any closing remarks, any thoughts before we wrap this episode of Disruptance up?
No, I think, if I were just to put it into a nutshell, I would say that, it's picking something you can do sustainably. I think of it as, what would you do if no one paid you? What would you do for free that you could start a business around? And,
Wow.
Maybe your passion is like, make it something where you can actually monetize it if that's the direction you're going to go. But if you're passionate about it and you'll do it at nearly no cost, then it could be worth exploring. If you have to get excited about the idea of potentially making a lot of money, but you have no passion to do it for free, then it's unlikely to be a sustainable business decision for you in the long run.
Wow.
Because the days that are difficult, you need a special reserve of motivation and commitment that doesn't exist unless you're passionate about something.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And it's almost that old analogy into thought process. If you won the lottery, tomorrow, would you still do what you're doing? If money wasn't a thing, would you still do what you're doing? Would you still wake up the same way every day? How would your life be if money wasn't, concerned? What would you be spending your time on? And I think if you evaluate into that thought process, there's going to be some things popping up. Not everything is going to be in an ultimate business in that sort of scenario, and that's fine. A lot of people, they work very specific occupations and businesses to then fund their love, right? Fund their true passions. That's fine too. I mean, ultimately, but we're talking about why entrepreneurs fail. I mean, these lists are, it's spot on in nature. We have some pushback on it. So again, Forbes, if you got any problems, you know where we are. I think this is good stuff here. But Eric, can't thank you enough as always, my friend. Another awesome episode of Disruptance. Everybody out there, if you love what we're doing here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. If you're learning something, let everybody know, because we're always trying to help as many people grow and scale their businesses as possible. So we appreciate the love and support. And we'll definitely catch you on the next episode.